Today we're going to be talking about some of the pros and also the perils of buying used sim racing equipment. The build started purely by accident one day after work. I found myself doom scrolling on Facebook Marketplace, no intentions of buying anything or looking at anything in particular, but then I saw some sim racing pedals that were local to me and very well priced. I messaged the guy just on a whim with a low ball offer and he accepted. I jumped in the van and went and collected them straight away. I've now found myself needing to finish a full sim build just over the sake of buying some pedals on a whim. However, that exact purchase is what's caused us problems today. Those pedals sat on the floor for around 3 months, never being tried or tested. Given the fact that the seller had already dismantled and sold the majority of his sim, we had no option to test these pedals upon purchase, so we had to take his word for it. Once we got our sim fully assembled, we knew straight away that we had a problem. Unfortunately, our clutch pedal was not responsive at all. After a lot of head scratching and reaching out to Wheelbase for diagnostics tips, they helped us diagnose that the port on the brake that the clutch actually plugs into has unfortunately failed. Wheelbase were brilliant in their diagnostics. Given that this is a second-hand purchase, we had no warranty, no receipt or any form of paperwork. They didn't even ask for a serial number. They just helped us with some tips to diagnose the fault and then were happy to supply us with the spare part. They even offered to provide this free of charge if we could have provided a receipt from the original buyer. However, typically, he chose not to reply to our message. This fix has only cost us around €40, which I think works out to about 30 odd pounds. So, truth be told, even with the used price that we paid, plus this repair, we're still quids in compared to buying new. So today we're going to fix our clutch pedal, as well as go over some of the other items on our sim that we picked up, used, and any issues that we maybe ran into, and things that you can look out for when making your purchases. One of the other items that we managed to pick up for an absolute steal was our Simucube wheel. We managed to grab this wheel on eBay for just £350 as an open box sale. The seller tells us that they purchased this wheel as part of a bundle and had no intentions of ever using this wheel, but it just worked out more cost effective for them to take the bundle. We took a bit of a gamble in trusting the seller and we hit buy it now at £350. When the wheel arrived, you could tell it was literally brand new, still in the wrapper and everything. Given that this wheel at the time was retailing for around about the £600 mark, this was a great saving for us, and we used that money that we saved on other components in our sim. Now, buying used wheels may not be to everyone's taste, given that it is the area of most contact in a sim. Could argue that it's not the most hygienic buying a used wheel that you know has had quite a lot of wear and tear. And obviously the Alcantara rims do often show signs of wear quite soon on. Now obviously the market for sim racing wheels is huge. They range anywhere from a few £100s all the way into the thousands. If you can find one that has very light usage, no usage at all, or as we say, an open box sort of deal, it's a great way to save a few quid. Now another thing that we managed to pick up used, which was quite a surprising purchase at a great price, was our Logitech Z906 speakers. Now these were retailing for around the 360 to 380 mark on Amazon. I hadn't budgeted that amount of money for a speaker system. We managed to pick these speakers up for a steal of £160, showing over a £200 saving. And again, we ran into a small issue with these. Upon unboxing the speakers, we noticed that all the wiring was mismatched and clearly aftermarket and not what would be provided from brand new. Now at the end of the day, this isn't a huge problem and doesn't affect the usage of the speakers. However, it's something again to consider in the comparison of buying used compared to new. Don't expect to receive everything in that box that you know would be in there from a brand new purchase. Reach out to the seller and check this first before hitting buy it now. Another issue with the speakers was that we were missing the remote. Not really essential given the way that we have mounted the controls to the side of the sim, which is in an arm's reach. We don't really need the remote, but me being me would have preferred to have been told that we wouldn't be receiving this in the package. In fact, we actually reached out to the seller and the seller told us they'd completely forgotten it was in a drawer and posted it out to us within a couple of days. The seller did that at their own expense, so we can only thank them for taking the time to sort that for us. Now, arguably one of the best purchases that we managed to pick up used was our Simucube 2 Pro wheelbase. We had to take an hour's drive to go and collect this, which when you factor that in, you're going to say maybe half a tank of fuel or so and a couple of hours of your day. Now, always factor that into the cost. You've got to weigh up that if you're going to collect a £50 item, but it costs you £50 in fuel, the saving probably just isn't there. However, for us, we managed to pick up this Simucube 2 Pro wheelbase for just £700. If I remember rightly, this was going for around £1,300 or £1,200 at the time. So that was a huge saving for us. And the saving on that wheelbase alone is what convinced us to go for a step up on the chassis and go for the SimLabs P1X Ultimate. Originally, we had no intention of spending that amount of money on the chassis, but given we'd just saved such a huge chunk on the wheelbase, compared to buying new, we had the spare change in our budget to do so. And that is probably the best thing about buying used. You really do get the best value for money and allow you to buy upgraded tiers in comparison to, say, brand new. Let's just say, for example, you've set aside £2,000 budget for your entire sim build. You could probably realistically be looking anywhere from £1,000 to £2,000, give or take, on used components, leaving you £700-800 or so in upgrades. Now, obviously, I'm just chucking random numbers out there. That's not accurate, but it gives you a ballpark figure that realistically, Sim Gear loses anywhere in the region of 20 to 40% of its new price used. Some items do hold the value better. You do have to take into consideration the seller's reasons for the sale. Are they strapped for cash and desperate to sell, meaning that maybe you can give them a low ball, or they've already priced it low to sell because they need it out the way ASAP? Or is it someone that has a collection of sim gear that's sat there unused and they're just filtering a few bits out and they don't care if it sits in a corner gathering dust? Those sorts of ones are going to be a harder buy. So judge your seller correctly and make a fair and reasonable bid. But as we say, buying used does have its cons. You take that risk of having an incomplete product, potentially a faulty product, and all at your own risk. There's rarely any comeback to buying used, especially when buying off something like Facebook Marketplace. Now obviously with eBay you do have a degree of protection. When you purchase off Facebook Marketplace and you go pay the seller in cash, or even a bank transfer, it can be quite tricky to claim any sort of funds back. Take care when looking at your purchases and do your homework. Buying the right products used is where to save money, and some items we would recommend still sticking to new. Something else that we ran into a problem with was our Asus bezel free kit. We purchased this off eBay for around £50 at the time. It came well packaged, however not in the original packaging. Upon unboxing this, we noticed that some of the brackets had snapped in transit. It was clear that this had happened due to mishandling of the courier. We reached out to the seller, who explained to us about the eBay postage system that they had used, meaning that it's completely out of the seller's hands and we had to open a case with eBay. Originally I thought they was fobbing us off. However, after a bit of googling I realised that they were right. We opened a case with eBay, uploaded some pictures of the damages and nearly instantly got a full refund. When I asked the seller if they needed the product back, they said no. That's what eBay handle. They are the middleman and they deal with it all. So yes, alright, the bezel kit was broken, but in fact the seller didn't lose out and we didn't lose out. So there's pros and cons to multiple different marketplaces. However, eBay arguably gives you the most protection as a buyer and a seller. Bear that in mind when you're shopping for your parts. You may see things costing a few pounds more on eBay compared to your marketplace, but weigh up, is that protection worth it? Now, after removing our ridiculously overpriced seat, our sim set us back around £5,000. If we hadn't taken the time to shop around and pick up some of the components used, we would have easily been closer to the 6+ mark for our sim, probably even 6.5. You don't have to buy everything used and you don't have to buy everything new. Shop around and get the best deals possible. Even look out for coupon codes by other creators who maybe have a affiliate link or can offer discount codes. It really does pay to do your homework when building a sim. Not only about the configuration, your personal preferences, triples versus VR, ultra wide, different chassis, you name it. You really do need to take your time before making any purchases. But shopping around for the best deals is really going to have an impact on the overall finish of your sim.